What term do you want your show to rank number one for? Okay, other than podcast, obviously. Maybe business podcast, political podcast. Hey, look, someone has to be number one. Why not make it you? But are you ready for the realities of life at the top of that list? Hello and welcome to another Podcast Pontifications with me, Evo Terra. Just picture for a moment what it must look like to be at the top of the heap. When someone goes to a search engine, an app, a whatever, and types in whatever phrase you want them to type in, and your show right up on top. Man, wouldn't that be great? You perhaps do a podcast that is featuring foreign affairs correspondents, and you want to be number one, and you are suddenly number one for foreign affairs podcast. Or maybe you interview bartenders around the world, and you want to be number one for a cocktail podcast. Great! And you've achieved it. That must feel great, right? And it does. I am not here to say it is not a great feeling to be there. I am fortunate enough over my years to have either helped people get there, or in some cases, some of my own stuff has been ranked number one for a highly desirable term. And it's been great. The traffic comes flooding in for a while, for a short amount of time. And that amount of time is shrinking nonstop. And the reason that it's shrinking nonstop is because the algorithms that dictate what number one means, search, in app, wherever, are constantly changing. More importantly, those algorithms, which determine who, what gets ranked on the top of that, are heavily influenced by lots of factors. But one of those factors is freshness of content. Another of those factors is authority and quantity and lots of other elements that go into that decision. What I'm trying to let you know here is that getting to the top, being on the top, is one thing, hard enough as it is. It's staying there that's the real trick. Now, this whole conversation came to me because I was having a conversation with my friend Alban Brook from Buzzcast when we were at PodFest Multimedia Expo in Orlando over dinner on Saturday night. And he asked me the question of what do you want to be number one for? And for my show, and I just kind of scratched my head over that. And it's one of those existential questions. And it got me to thinking about, what it's going to be like if you do get number one. So forget how to get there. There's lots of other shows that'll tell you how to get there. And this is not a talk about SEO or even iTunes/Apple Podcasts algorithm optimization. No. That's not what this is. Let's just assume for a moment that you do get there. How do you stay there? And perhaps even more importantly, did you really want to do that? I mean, to maintain your number one ranking means you have to stay laser focused on that thing you ranked for. Because you're not probably going to rank on the word just podcast, probably not even your category podcast, but something more specific to that. Podcast for private clinicians. Something along those lines. Scuba diving in the Maldives podcast. As way of example. To sustain that, you have to keep producing content about that thing. If you got rewarded in whatever it was that you did to get there, you have to keep doing that. Because it's not a get there and forget it. To maintain your number one ranking, you really will have to forget about the independence of doing whatever the heck you feel like. If you feel like having an off episode which is nowhere near what your topic is, that can impact your rankings. To be number one, you have to continue to push out content that is about that thing you got number one for. To make it so obvious to the algorithms, as well as the human beings that the algorithms are trying to replicate, that your show is about one thing. And that's great. I honestly think you should have your show about one thing. But do you think your show should be about one thing? Do you think the clever little segments, or the sometimes diatribes, or the fact that you put in 9 different topics in any given show, those aren't helping you maintain that number one status? So do you want to do that? Do you want to change your show so drastically that you maintain it? Maybe you don't. Because again, podcasting means a lot of things to a lot of people. And there is no one right way to do it. There are many successful podcasts out there. In fact, most successful podcasts don't rank number one. So you don't have to do that. But you probably should at least examine all the things that you're doing that make it difficult for you to attain that level and keep that level if it were there. You can't be random about when you produce episodes. You might have to produce a whole lot more episodes. You might have to spend more time planning and strategizing your episodes. You might have to spend more times outside, away from the microphone, doing the sorts of things that got you the attention in the first place. You might have to really think about content generation in a whole new way, because that's what it takes to maintain a top ranking. It's not just a rinse and repeat of what got you there. It's staying focused on that and then doing things that are adjacent to that would likely influence those algorithms today and tomorrow. So your podcast is number one. That's a great reality. Is it? I hope I've given you just a little bit of things to think about. Now, I want to give you a daily challenge. My daily challenge for you is this. I want you to ask one of your podcasting compadres what they think your show should rank for. Just what they know about your show right now. Perhaps they're a listener, perhaps they're not a listener. Ask your podcasting friend what they think your show should be ranking for. And you do the same. Return the favor. Tell them what you think their show should be ranking for. I bet you they'll think it's something different than you, and you'll think whatever it was is different than what they had to say. And by all means, tell them about this episode of the show, because obviously I'd like to have another listener. It would be great. But I think sharing those ideas would be a wonderful thing. And I'm curious, what do you think my show should rank for? Drop me an email, evo@podcastlaunch.pro. That's it. I shall be back tomorrow with yet another Podcast Pontifications. Cheers.